The morning heat in downtown Atlanta was already rising when Ariana Brooks stepped into the polished marble foyer of Orion Trust Bank. She didn't wear designer heels or carry a monogrammed handbag. Instead, she moved with the quiet assurance of someone who didn't need to prove her worth. A soft sky blue sweater hugged her frame. Simple dark denim outlined clean lines, and her only accessory, a charcoal leather tablet case, rested calmly in her left hand. She was 45, graceful, composed, and entirely unbothered by the glances cast in her direction. This wasn't just a visit, it was a test. The Orion Trust branch on Peachtree Avenue had been praised in industry reports for its elite client service and discretion. But Ariana didn't trust headlines. She trusted behavior. She approached the reception desk where a young associate glanced up, offered a tight smile, and directed her to the private client lounge without asking any questions. Perhaps the name on her request, A. Brooks, had triggered some recognition in the system, or perhaps more likely, they assumed she was a personal assistant sent ahead. Inside the lounge, the lights were soft, filtered through frosted glass and gold-trimmed sconces. Fresh espresso sat untouched on polished trays. Every chair was a promise of comfort, but also a quiet symbol of status. Ariana took a seat near the window, opened her tablet, and began reviewing the wire instructions. She was here to authorize a $2.5 million withdrawal, a move that, by policy, required in-person identity verification. She was still reviewing a compliance attachment when the air shifted, the kind of shift you feel, not hear. A woman's heels clicked with precision on the marble floor. Sharp, intentional. Chloe Martin, 42, the branch manager, strode into the lounge like a lit match hunting fuel. Her tailored gray suit hugged her frame with corporate precision, and her perfectly angled bob bobbed as she stopped in front of Ariana. Her smile was absent. "Excuse me," Chloe said flatly. "This section is reserved for Orion priority clients." Ariana didn't blink. "Yes, that's me." Chloe raised an eyebrow, performative disbelief. "We'll need to verify that. Do you have documentation proving the origin of the funds you're requesting?" Ariana's fingers paused on the tablet. She had expected this. Maybe not so soon, maybe not so direct, but she had expected it. Quietly, she tapped the screen, queued up a portfolio document, and slid it across the table. Chloe didn't touch it. She merely stared. "I'll have one of our specialists review this," she said curtly. Before Ariana could respond, a man's voice cut in from behind. "Sweetheart, try the ATM line next time." Elliot Price, 50s, well-tanned and overconfident, wore a navy suit so loud it might have declared its portfolio. He smirked as he passed, deliberately knocking Ariana's tablet from the table with a flick of his wrist. It fell with a muted thud, but in that silence, it was deafening. Ariana reached down, picked it up, and placed it gently back on the table. Her expression never changed. From the far corner, Vanessa Tran, a private banking associate in her 30s, arms folded tight against her crisp blouse, muttered just loud enough to be heard, "2.5 million? That doesn't add up. Not in that outfit." The room didn't gasp, but it tensed. Ariana looked at Vanessa, then Chloe, her voice cool and unshaken. "Run my name. You'll find everything you need." Chloe shook her head. "You're not verified. This isn't a walk-in center." In the back, a young man in tech casual clothes had begun recording with his phone, barely visible, just a small red light pulsing. Ariana noticed. She turned and said, softly but firmly, "Please don't, not yet. We don't need an audience. We need accountability." Her voice didn't rise, but the room's pulse did. This wasn't about the money. It never was. This was about assumptions, about who is allowed to sit quietly in a space like this and be believed, about who has to prove their presence, prove their worth, before they have even spoken. Ariana looked at the time, 9:57 a.m. In exactly 10 minutes, everyone in that room would understand not only who she was, but what she had come here to do. A soft hum of conversation filled the private lounge until it fractured like glass under pressure. Ariana Brooks remained seated, her posture unyielding, eyes steady on Chloe Martin's face. But beneath the calm, something seismic was unfolding. Chloe turned away from the tablet on the polished table and squared her shoulders. "Mr. Delgado," she called to the security officer in the back, "please escort Miss Brooks to my office for further verification." The name carried weight. Ryan Delgado, Orion Trust's head of security, stepped forward, expression blank. He held a discreet earpiece, proof this was orchestrated. Ariana didn't flinch as he approached. Before Ryan could reach her, a trembling voice broke out from the side. Jenna Lee stood, clutching the strap of her purse. Her eyes were fierce. "You did this to me," she said, voice low but cutting. "2 months ago, you refused to open my account because I'm a photographer. You said my income was inconsistent." Vanessa Tran's lip curled. "This isn't about you, Jenna. Sit down." Jenna lifted her chin. "No, it is. Because right now, you're telling the CEO she doesn't belong. And you humiliated me first." A sudden hush fell. Chloe's gaze flicked to her. Surprise, annoyance, disbelief. Then she regained composure, but Ariana saw the crack. Elliot Price leaned back in his chair, rolling his eyes. "Great, another amateur videographer coming to save the day." He smirked at Jenna, arms splayed provocatively. Ariana spoke then, softly, but the quiet carried. "Mr. Price, please stop. This isn't about your opinions." He scoffed. "Opinions? This is a bank. You need credentials." Chloe advanced while a hand outstretched toward Ariana's tablet. "We need to confirm the funds. The request is unusual." Ryan lingered close enough that Ariana could feel his shadow. The tension was no longer hidden. Every staff member, every client, was complicit in this trial by bias. A sudden click announced a new arrival. Darren Shaw, Ariana's executive aide. He slipped through the lounge doors with deliberate calm. His presence was a silent signal. The game has begun. Chloe's jaw tightened. "Darren, please wait outside." Darren smiled politely. "Of course," he said, though his eyes never left Ariana. He pressed a button on his tablet, an icon glowed. Protocol Theta was live. Chloe's phone buzzed. She glanced down. "I'm not receiving internal confirmation," she muttered to herself. Ariana took the moment to speak directly to the room. "You've questioned me long enough. You've implied I don't belong here, that I'm an imposter, but you haven't answered the real question." Hands trembled on tablet screens. Ryan shifted, uncomfortable. Vanessa's lips parted to speak, then closed. "What is the true value of this institution?" Ariana continued. "Is it the marble, the recessed lighting, the gold-plated fixtures? Or is it the people it serves and the respect it shows them?" A low murmur rippled through the clients. A well-dressed couple exchanged worried glances. Two businessmen over cups of espresso put their phones down. One elderly woman gripped her handbag tightly, as though bracing herself. Chloe lifted her chin. "Ms. Brooks, we can't make exceptions." Ariana inclined her head ever so slightly. "I'm not asking for an exception. I'm asking for fairness." Jenna stood beside Ariana now. "There are at least 6 recorded complaints of bias against Miss Tron here," she said, her voice firm. "All dismissed without review. You called me unreliable. Now you refuse to acknowledge your records." A collective breath was caught. Vanessa's cheeks flushed. She glanced at Chloe, who looked at her in panic. Elliot Price, sensing the shift, tried to break the tension. "This is ridiculous." Ariana held up a hand. "Let me finish." The lounge grew silent again. At 9:57, Ariana said quietly, "I sat here, invisible. You saw a woman in jeans and a sweater. You made judgments. Because you believe appearances dictate worth. And now, 10 minutes later, you are failing to see the person who sits before you. Chloe's phone buzzed again, this time louder. She answered it, voice strained. Yes, I understand. Protocol Theta confirmed. All video and audio feeds are secure. We're under direct corporate oversight. Sweat beaded at her hairline. She turned to Ariana, eyes wide. I, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it. Ariana held Chloe's gaze. You realized. You decided to ignore it. The room exhaled as if waking from a nightmare. Elliot's smirk vanished. Ryan's posture slumped. Vanessa's arms dropped to her sides. A moment later, Darren re-entered. His tablet displayed a live feed, every derogatory phrase, every refusal, every snide remark, logged and time-stamped. Darren looked at Chloe. Ms. Martin, it appears you violated corporate policy 8.4 on client non-discrimination. Shall we proceed? Chloe's face paled. She faltered. Proceed with what? To a formal hearing, Darren replied gently, and to personnel review. That word, hearing, felt like a verdict. Ariana stood slowly, the soft fabric of her sweater brushing the chair. I didn't come here to argue. I came here to test this branch's integrity. She looked at each staff member in turn. Now you know what you failed. The private lounge, once a stage for silent prejudice, shifted into something else entirely, a chamber of reckoning. And in that charged, breathless air, everyone understood. The collapse of trust had begun. There are moments when silence no longer protects, when even the most composed mask must crack beneath the weight of truth. And this was that moment. The polished floor of the Orion Trust Lounge gleamed under morning light, but the air had turned sharp, heavy with the realization that something irreversible had just begun. Ariana Brooks stood tall now, no longer seated, no longer patient. Darren's voice was steady, his tablet screen facing the room. For those who just joined, he said clearly, this lounge is now under active monitoring. Corporate compliance is live streaming this exchange. All audio, video, and procedural actions are being recorded under Protocol Theta, authorized by Orion Capital Holdings. He paused, then added, by direct order of the CEO. Chloe Martin tried to speak, but the words snagged in her throat. Wait, what do you mean, the CEO? Vanessa Tran took an instinctive step back, her hands clutching the edge of the service desk. Ariana's voice sliced through the stillness, precise and unwavering. My name is Ariana Brooks. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Orion Capital Holdings. We acquired Orion Trust Bank 18 months ago in a full equity transaction. I currently hold 72% controlling ownership over all branch operations, including this one. Chloe's face went white. You, what? Ariana didn't raise her voice. She simply opened her tablet case, retrieved a slim black folder, and turned it outward for the room to see. Inside were 3 documents: a notarized board authorization letter, her corporate ID badge, and a certified ownership certificate bearing her name. Gasps echoed. One man near the espresso bar stood up and took a half step back. An older woman whispered to her husband. Even Elliot Price, who had spent the past 10 minutes dominating the room, went utterly silent. Jenna Lee let out a sharp breath, eyes welling. I knew it, she whispered. I knew she wasn't just a client. Ryan Delgado, the security officer, looked as though he'd been hit by a train. I wasn't here to make a scene, Ariana continued calmly. I was here to observe, to measure your values, to test your humanity in a space designed to serve, not to sort. Chloe's voice cracked. Why would you do that without telling us who you are? Because who I am shouldn't matter, Ariana said. Not until you've proven who you are. The room froze. Darren took over, stepping forward. Corporate compliance has confirmed 12 prior bias-related complaints filed at this branch. 9 of them were dismissed without review. 7 involved women of color, all linked to this team. Vanessa's hand shot up defensively. That can't be accurate. It's not only accurate, Darren replied, it's documented with your initials on the dismissal forms. Ariana turned her gaze to Chloe. I gave you 10 minutes to show grace, integrity, or at the very least, professionalism. Instead, you showed arrogance, hostility, and unchecked entitlement. Chloe's lip trembled. We didn't know. But you assumed, Ariana cut in. You assumed I didn't belong here. You assumed my clothing determined my worth. You assumed without a second glance that I couldn't possibly be what I am. Her voice didn't shake. It landed like a stone in water, rippling outward. Elliot Price, who had watched in silence, finally stood. Look, let's not turn this into some corporate protest. This isn't about race, it's about policy. It became about race, Ariana said. The moment your assumptions walked ahead of your reason, the moment you knocked my tablet off the table like I was less than human, and the moment you laughed when a fellow client was called a thief for wearing denim. A single tear slipped down Jenna-Lee's cheek. This is what we go through, and people call it exaggeration. Ariana's eyes softened just slightly. No more exaggeration. No more erasure. We build institutions not to serve the loudest egos, but to protect the quiet dignity of those who walk in expecting fairness. She turned to Ryan. And you, Officer Delgado, reached for my tablet without permission. Is that protocol? He swallowed hard. Was following orders. No, Ariana said quietly. You were following culture, and culture can be reformed. Vanessa sat down slowly, the reality settling in. Chloe, still standing, looked around, grasping for allies. But the room had turned. Even Elliot didn't move to defend her. Then in the far corner, a new voice rose, unexpected, quiet, but certain. Excuse me, said a tall black man in a gray blazer. He stepped forward slowly. I think it's time someone else spoke. He paused, then looked at Ariana. You may not remember me. Daniel Harris, Regional Ethics Officer. I was in the acquisition meetings. You inspired half the changes in our internal diversity protocol. Ariana nodded once, recognizing him. Daniel turned to the room. And let me be clear, what just happened? This will be the case study we use to teach every new employee what bias looks like when it's dressed up as procedure. The silence that followed wasn't uncertain. It was respect. Ariana took one last glance around. This wasn't just a reveal, it was a reckoning. And it's not over yet. She reached for her phone and said only 2 words, begin review. And with that, the next phase began. Not a scene, not a confrontation, but the first movement of a system is being rebuilt. The lounge that once shimmered with exclusivity now felt like a tribunal, walls no longer insulating privilege, but echoing the weight of accountability. Ariana Brooks stood at the center, still composed, still quiet. Her authority didn't shout. It didn't need to. It radiated, like the shift in air before a storm that doesn't need thunder to make itself known. Behind her, Darren Shaw nodded as corporate compliance confirmed Phase 2 of Protocol Theta was live. HR teams, legal counsel, and executive oversight were monitoring remotely from headquarters. But Ariana wasn't looking at a screen. She was looking at them. She stepped forward, just one step, but it changed everything. I'm not here to make an example of anyone, she began. I'm here to restore what was broken, not just trust, but truth. She turned to Chloe Martin, the branch manager, whose tone had turned an ordinary withdrawal into a weaponized assumption. Chloe Martin, Ariana said softly, you are hereby terminated, effective immediately for gross misconduct, racial bias, and abuse of authority. Chloe's lips parted. Wait, please, I didn't mean... Ariana raised her hand, not to silence her, but to stop her from unraveling herself further. You meant exactly what you did. You meant every gate you closed, every warning you ignored, every time you saw someone and decided they weren't enough. Chloe stumbled back and sank into a chair, the weight of her unraveling composure folding in on itself. Ariana turned to Vanessa Tran next. Vanessa Tran, your employment is terminated for deliberately suppressing bias-related complaints, falsifying client behavior notes, and escalating security responses without due diligence. Vanessa shook her head as if waking from a dream. I didn't know it was you. Ariana's voice remained level. And if it had been someone else, would you have cared less? Or perhaps more? Vanessa said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Ariana moved next to Ryan Delgado, the security officer who had hovered too closely, reached too quickly, and acted too obediently. Ryan, your badge is revoked. You're dismissed for complicit aggression and unlawful detainment attempt. Ryan didn't argue, but as he removed his ID card and set it on the table, he murmured, I thought I was just doing my job. Ariana met his eyes. Your job is to protect, not to intimidate. Then came the sharpest turn. Elliot Price, still seated, arms crossed and jaw tight, scoffed. What, I get banned because I called out a suspicious client? That's not illegal. It's just good instincts. Ariana approached him, not out of anger, but with the weight of history behind every word. You are hereby banned from all Orion-affiliated institutions, effective immediately. Your client's privileges are revoked, permanently, not for suspicion, not for opinion, but for harassment, racial provocation, and documented misconduct. Elliot stood abruptly. You'll regret this. I've brought this bank millions over the years. Ariana's voice cooled. We no longer measure worth in millions. We measure it in integrity. The applause didn't start right away. No one clapped performatively, but something shifted in the room, a reverence. The kind that only comes when truth is spoken aloud and cannot be undone. Then came a tremor of sound, Jenna Lee's voice trembling but firm. For the first time, I feel like I'm not invisible here. Ariana turned, her expression softening. You never were. They just trained themselves not to see you. From the corner, Daniel Harris, the ethics officer, stepped forward. Compliance has begun internal audits. Records are being pulled. Training will be rebuilt from scratch, starting with this branch. But we'll need someone to help lead it. Ariana didn't hesitate. She looked at Jenna. You spoke when others stayed silent. You stood even when the room tried to erase you. Would you join us as a community advisor on the Equity Council? Jenna's eyes widened, then filled. She nodded, slowly, stunned. And in the silence that followed, something beautiful happened. Not closure, not forgiveness, but a shift. A reckoning that didn't just remove the rot. It made space for something new to grow. Ariana turned one last time to the remaining staff. This is not the end of a scandal. It's the beginning of a standard. Then to the clients who had remained, watching, listening, learning. Today wasn't about embarrassment. It was about exposure. And from exposure comes evolution. The silence that followed the firings wasn't hollow. It was sacred. Ariana Brooks didn't linger in victory. She didn't gloat, didn't pause for applause. Instead, she turned to the room, clients, staff, security, even those who had once dismissed her, and began again. Effective immediately, she said, this branch will pause all operations. No new transactions, no account actions, no client appointments until we rebuild this space from the inside out. There were no groans, no resistance, just nods, some hesitant, some relieved. From the back of the room, Carla Lang, Orion's head of compliance, appeared with two officers behind her. She held a slim folder and a digital stylus. Corporate has approved your authority to lead the debrief and launch reforms, Ms. Brooks. The floor is yours. Ariana took the folder with a nod. We're launching the Orion Reset Initiative, starting right here, right now. She looked at Jenna Lee, still processing the weight of her new role. Every remaining staff member will be required to complete a verbal conduct audit. Not just numbers, not just files. We're going to examine how people are spoken to, how they're made to feel, and whether fairness is embedded in every word. The room shifted again, not in resistance, but in awakening. Daniel Harris, the ethics officer, stepped forward. We'll also install facial obscured feedback stations at every entrance. Clients will be able to document how they were treated before they even say their names. Ariana nodded. We track what matters. And what matters most is the human experience. Keith, the young man who had first lifted his phone, whispered to Maya beside him, "This isn't policy. This is revolution." Maya nodded, a quiet one, but real. Then, as if on cue, Tyler Moss, the former security officer, stepped forward again. This time, he didn't wear authority. He wore accountability. "I failed this place," he said quietly. "But if there's any way I can make it right, any role I can play in dismantling what I helped build, I'll take it." Ariana studied him. "Then start by telling the truth." He nodded. "There's a tag buried deep in the CRM system used to mark clients of concern. I helped build it. Almost everyone flagged had one thing in common. They look like you, or Jenna, or Maya." Gasps again. Carla tapped her tablet. "Confirmed. We're freezing that module. A full forensic audit will begin today." But the moment that carried the deepest weight came next. From the far corner, an older white man stood slowly, neatly dressed, client badge glinting under the lights. "My name is Richard Langford," and he said, "I trained half the staff in this region years ago. We never said it outright, but we coded our bias into words like client suitability and profile risk. I was part of the system that built this problem." He looked straight at Ariana. "Today, watching you stand still and speak while the room fell apart, that reminded me I've had a voice this whole time and never used it." Ariana approached him with quiet grace. "Then use it now." Richard turned to the compliance team. "I'll give a full deposition, and I'd like to join the National Retraining Task Force." The room didn't erupt. It breathed, not in relief, but in recognition. Ariana turned back to those still watching. This bank was never meant to serve only the wealthy. It was meant to serve the worthy, and worth is not defined by color, accent, or clothing. She looked at Jenna. "Starting today, every branch will ask, not how much does this person have, but how well are we seeing them?" Carla's voice chimed from the tablet speaker. "The executive board just approved a nationwide policy shift. Every Orion branch will implement these reforms, with Atlanta as the blueprint." Then came the moment that redefined the day. "Let this be the last time silence walks away stronger than truth," Ariana said. "Let this be the first time we build an institution around dignity, not perception." The room rose, not all at once, but steadily. Clients, staff, witnesses, even doubters. Some clapped, some didn't, but everyone listened. And for the first time, everyone belonged. Lesson learned. This wasn't just a story about one woman proving her ownership. It was about dismantling a system that survives on assumptions. It was about the difference between power and presence. Vanessa Brooks never had to raise her voice. She didn't retaliate with rage. She responded with truth, clarity, and consequence. Because justice isn't loud, it's precise. Let this story remind us. Dignity doesn't wear designer logos. Authority doesn't always walk in with a title badge. And true reform doesn't start with blame. It starts with accountability. Whether you walk into a bank, a boardroom, or any place where silence once ruled, remember, You don't have to match their expectation. You just have to stand in your truth. And when you do, even the walls will listen.